Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Matt Anderton. I've got my colleague with me.
Hi, my name is Emily.
And we're really excited to be inviting you to the webinar today to talk around implementation of automation, how we have a history of doing that and how we work collaboratively with partners to be able to install automation effectively to be able to get real tangible outcomes of automation. For those that don't know who we are, Axlab Limited is a company that was born in Denmark just over 30 years ago. A histotech in one of the labs in Copenhagen decided to open up a company, and that's who we are. We're a company that is born out of histology for histology, where we look, and we have been for sort of 3 decades, looking to transform and automate some of the processes within histology. Axlab Limited in the UK was created in November of 22, and we've been on this transformation journey of bringing automation into the UK, and we're really proud of being able to do that. And today is about sharing some of that with you on how we bring automation into a very manual process, and how we can then take that and we can then transform our service to be able to have a service that is quite frankly fit for purpose for today's needs, for today's demands of workload, shortage of staff, complexity of work. So essentially that's who we are. I'm not the brains behind the outfit, and I'm definitely not the looks behind the outfit either. That's all Amalia's job today. So I want to hand you over to Amalia to actually talk you through all of it all.
Thank you. From my end, I'm also really excited to be here. This is going to be one of many webinars we have been doing. Everyone is having a different outcome and outlet. And today, as Matt is speaking into, we are going to talk about automation in general. My name is Emily Onig, and I am the application manager here at Axlab. Today, I am going to speak and take you on a journey on the application approach from my side, or our side, application team. So let's just start. Before we start the presentations, I just want to say that we will really like if you could state your questions in the Q&A sessions. You can do that on the top left of your screen. If you're typing in for a Q&A, we're not going to see any names, but there's also the possibility of using the chat just right next to it. And if you do that, we are able to see names. We really want to have as many questions as possible because we feel like that these presentations will feed into a lot of questioning. Yeah. So working alongside automation, we can speak a lot of that, and there is a lot to be said. What I want to highlight as a focus is that automation is actually what we can say a focus to enhance efficiency, consistency, and quality. That what we want to achieve demands for today and the future for faster turnaround times, higher precision, and increased flexibility. Automation is the key role player here to meet those expectations where we currently see that it cannot be met. And for that, we need to have successful implementation, and that is based on a strong collaboration between people and machines. We Axlab want to be that bridge. We want to ensure that automated solution is not only technology, but actually that we can align to modern workflows out there. So there are many reasons to why we're looking into automation and why we're still looking into automation. The key topics to my left is, of course, the most common topics. What we are discussing is, of course, increasing productivity, consistency, quality, and precision, and so on. But what we have been experiencing is actually we are also seeing some long-term benefits, such as increasing the working morale, eliminate cross-contamination, things that are not only affecting the patient, but also the staff in a highly positive way. We are also seeing new skill set is being manufactured by automation. And what we're seeing is actually we can conduct positive changes to a current workflow based on bringing new technology.
So some of the stuff that we don't measure currently in our workflow are tangible effects from implementing automation effectively, right?
Yes. So some of the key facts that we are buying into is actually some of the things that we're now trying to visualize and display. Also, the fact that we want to uplift quality of manual processes. And this might not be something we're talking into that much, but we are seeing that automation can actually also uplift a manual process. Yeah. So it doesn't matter where we are investing in, really complex automation, or we're choosing from less complexity, like maybe a printer, cassette printer, or we're going for more heavy automation. What we need to understand that every time that we are bringing new automation in, new equipment in, it requires change. And change is not always considered with really much positivity. We as humans don't want to change. We want to have the same thing throughout. So what we have learned in our company is if you have a strategy plan to tackle this change, it's far better accepted down the line, and the implementation phase will be far smoother.
Interesting.
And by doing so, you can do that in a lot of different ways. How we're seeing this being implemented the best way is that we are saying to ourselves that always will not give a new destination, meaning that we need to accept that there's going to be change. Yeah. And this is a PDSA role. This is a module. This is a copyright model. This is not ours. But I think this is speaking really much into how we prepare for change on a product, on a process, or a service. And this is quality driven. So if we start by the plan, what we want is to define our objectives. So why are we buying the equipment? Is it because we want to have better printing, so it's far easier to be scanned when we are doing our sectioning? Is it that we want to have a different workflow, so we are adding on an auto embedder so that we don't have to use that manual labor? We can do that for something else. Are we bringing in automated sectioning so we don't have to come in on Wednesday? We have to define our objectives.
Yes.
And when we have that, we need to engage stakeholders. Of course, we do so, but we also need to engage different people for different departments, because we want to have a different take on how could this even be possible from more ends. And then, of course, assess current workflow, because we know things are changing. And the sooner we are aware of these changes, the better we can develop a plan, which is the next thing.
Perfect.
To do things is to implement a small scale that could be projects. So let's say we want this amount of blocks, or we want this amount of cassette. Have a plan on how we are scaling the test and have people trained. The study is now reviewing results, and this is really much, are we aligned, tuning into what our defined objectives were?
Okay. Have we actually met?
Have we met them? And the better you are at defining your objects, the better it is to actually view your results.
Okay.
Collect feedback, any feedback from, that could be staff using the units. That could be good to bring to the supplier to emphasize and speaking into this wheel. Analyze on your data. Now we are ready to refine the processes. We are able to prepare for full implementation. And this is here, it's really important that we are transparent with our staff, because this is where we actually are saying that this department is going to have this change and you're going to be a part of it.
Okay.
So this wheel is really good at facility level. Now we're talking about staff and employees. And that could be a different thing, because not everyone is engaged with change, right?
Or ready for change, right?
Or ready for change.
Yeah.
So one thing is the facility think that this is a really good idea, that we are buying into this equipment. But what about the staff? Because who is actually implementing these things? It's more so actually the people that are working with the system.
Right.
So this model, AdCar model, is again a protected model. It's not something we have reinvented, but we think this is a good 5-step to how people is actually engaging with change. The first thing is we want to bring awareness is why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? So everyone knows, okay, we are bringing this equipment in to relieve some of our repetitive workload, to be smarter, be faster, with less production hours.
Okay.
For instance. Then we want to have the desire state, and desire is that when I have my awareness, I could engage with what needs to be done, and then I desire it.
Now I have a desire to
Now you
actually
have a
move forward.
desire because you know the awareness, you know why. Then there's the knowledge that not only do you know what is going to change, but how are you going to change? How are you going to adapt to the changes that's going to come?
Okay.
The ability is that you know you can change, and you have the support from your supervisor, the management, etc.
From the facility.
From
right?
the facility. And this is highly important that you have the ability and the support from the change.
Okay.
And then reinforcement. And reinforcement is, of course, then we now is sustaining the change. But we do that through positive feedback and positive influence on that specific staff member in order to increase what they're already doing.
Would you say, Amalia, that these two aspects, the facility and driving that change and then getting the staff engaged, it's a journey, there's no end point, it's a continuous cycle, right?
It's continuous. And I'm not saying that this will fit all. There might be some point where we need to, concentrate a lot of the awareness, maybe more on the desire state. But if we are following these and making sure that we try to accommodate it, I feel like we're at such a better start, and especially the ability. I cannot remember how many people are saying, I have the support from my lab manager, my facility, in order to do this implementation.
Were these some of the key sort of take-homes that you had when you were in the lab and you were implementing automation with your facility or within your facility? Were these some of the processes and the steps that were utilized to help you and your team and your staff to go through with this change?
Yeah, there was a lot of awareness and there was a lot of desire. So it was quite easy because we would have fed presentation on the equipment that we were about to implement and have in the facility. And the more awareness you're getting, the more ownership you're also getting. And by having ownership, you are desiring, and then you can feed into all this. And then, of course, the reinforcement continuously. So if we should take our take on how are we spinning this wheel, what we will recommend from our perspective is that you are building a core implementation team.
Okay.
Pick and choose some pathologists, some IT, lab techs, managers, etc., and then have a workflow assessment. And this is something we as a company, we are providing workflow assessment. And I'm going to speak back to that, but that is a huge player in how we are implementing automation. Expectation requirements with suppliers. So this is, again, what are your expectations when we are putting this system into your facility? Do you want it to make coffee? Do you want it to, what do you want it to do? Make a group of 2 or 3 super users. And again, make sure that you are having this staff throughout your training and validation, if not a longer period, to sustain this change. And then making sure that these people who's actually engaged with this task is giving responsibility. Because again, when you give responsibility, you're giving ownership.
Would you say creating a group of super users, would you say that it's prudent to have the same amount or the same people through that whole entire process to keep that continuity around that parallel workflow within that automation?
Yes.
Would you say that that's one of the key takeaways?
One of the key take-homes.
Fantastic.
Make sure you have the same staff for X amount of time, because otherwise it could be really difficult to see if you have met your objectives.
So I've had the privilege to visit some of the Danish sites, and I think it's safe to say that they've got the same group of super users around any bits of automation that they've installed from start to and still to this day. They've still got a good core of people around that, and what we've seen is that drives that continuity and that sustainability of that parallel workflow, right? And
why do you think that is? Because now they have been working with this system long enough to be engaged.
And it's accountability, right?
You want to see it thrive.
Perfect.
Yeah. Then, of course, weekly supplier touch points is really important with the supplier, that we know, are we on the same route? Are we on the path that you want to be at? And then the last one is, of course, communicating these changes to the department. And this is, again, to be transparent with what is going to change. because if units is just dropping down from the sky into a facility and no one hears about it, it's not going to be a positive change already there. It's going to be a surprise, and that's going to cause a lot of concern that is unnecessary for the process.
Well, you get units that become very expensive dust collectors, right? And I think that's none of us want that, right? We want to be at the forefront of this transformation. So it's about that in continuous engagement, right?
And by not having that communicating out there to the rest of the department, you can easily have what we call stick in the wheel.
Yes.
So staff that is actually blocking this process of implementation. So the workflow assessment that we provide is that we are going through the entire workflow before we are installing units. And the reason why we're doing it is of course, because what are the process before and after, the steps before and after, because sometimes if you are, let's say, implementing a auto trimmer or section, and we need to understand what, how and why are we fitting that into that matrix. Mm-hmm. Because we have just seen that sometimes a workflow can surprise us in a negative way. So the implementation phase is just going to be prolonged. And we know that automation thrives on uniformity. So the better we can prepare the lab for these changes, the faster, again, the turnaround time and the more adaptable it is for that change.
I also think that industry have a part to play in this, right? Because I think there's various suppliers that have bits of automation kit that fits into the workflow, and I think what we need to do as industry is collaborate a little bit more along with the facilities, with the hospitals, the trusts, in making sure that what's being implemented isn't affecting the upward stream or the downward stream, right? And if it is, how do we make that then collectively work together, right?
And unfortunately, we have seen suppliers that are just coming in, setting a unit and walking away. And then it cannot be utilized to its fullest potential because you don't understand the full overview of that workflow and that facility. What is also to remember is that some of these automated solution is causing what we in Axlab is calling a parallel workflow. Actually, a workflow that it's sustaining and supporting the current manually one. And that we are with labs that have a high install base are seeing what we today call a paradigm shift. And actually what that paradigm shift is, it's a fundamental change of how we rethink on why we and how we are doing things. So rethinking mindset and processes, again, it's a change. Yeah. And what we have been seeing with this parallel workflow is actually, as you can also see on the screen, that it can free up staff to do other tasks that requires more expertise, better skill set, and that the automation can take care of the bulk work. The bulk work that is so daunting in repetitive workload, economics, and so on. And that automation has now created a new skill set. So you actually have to be good at troubleshooting on automated solutions, where before you were relying a lot of your manual knowledge. But again, I want to say that you cannot have automation and then not have the manual knowledge, because who is troubleshooting on automated devices? That is the knowledge you're having with you. So
when you need the people to do the intelligent work, as I would like to call it, being a non-lab person, non-clinical minded person, but you've got this expertise and you want that expertise in the right place, right? So you want that, and you want the machines to do the like you say, the routine work. And I think one of the ways I've had it described to me is this parallel workflow is an automated motorway, right? So you've got this automated motorway that does this routine work, and you have that flowing through from start to finish, and it does that bulk work. At the moment, the automated motorway, if you would like to call it, because of where the technology is maybe only 2 or 3 lanes wide. And as that starts to grow, and as we start to bring in more automation, that gets a little wider, and then you start to have a bigger workflow of routine work, right?
But what you can say is you don't have a traffic light on that motorway, so you have to have somebody there supervision it. Absolutely. And you need to have somebody there supervision it that has a skill set in order to correct if something is wrong.
Absolutely.
So I think that automation is causing this paradigm shift where we're seeing that you are actually advancing your skill set in a different way. So I don't think it's a matter on automation on humans. I think it's a matter of us working together, because it brings different skill set to one another. Lastly, I just want to give you this overview graph. This is 4 to 15 days production from one of our bigger labs. And this is how that automation can stabilize a production. So I really want you to pay attention to the red line and the black line. The red line is the manually conducted sections. And then we have the black line, which is the more flattened out production line by the AS410M. And this is just to say this is on 2 weeks. Imagine what this can do 1 month from now, 2 months from now, maybe years from now, how we can stabilize a production through this parallel workflow.
Absolutely. And I think we get to probably now start to hear a little bit about that, about some customers' journeys around automation, right?
Yeah.
And see some of their data around, and this is not automation that's just been brought to you by Axlab as an entity, because I come back to a statement that I make, if anyone that has met me, is that there's not one supplier, manufacturer that can fit the bill from start to finish, right? So I do believe that to be a part of a successful journey is that it's a collaboration between industry and also healthcare facilities, and it's how we do that will determine whether or not we have a successful transformation or not. And I, for one, I'm really, really keen to hear from some of the customers talking about some of their journeys.
Me too. Now I'm going to give the word to Germany.
I've just been asked by my lovely colleagues that are at the front desk producing this webinar to please ask your questions. So please use the Q&A function or the chat function to ask questions. This is my first time doing a webinar, and it's a really lonely place being stood in front of a camera. I know I've got Amelia with me, so please get those questions coming in. We would like to hear from you. We would like to answer. We've got Amelia, who has an absolute hoard of application knowledge. She's truly one of the best people I've had the privilege of working with around in ensuring that we get stuff implemented correctly. We've got customers, we've got James, we've got Zara, and we've got Professor Hurst, who would absolutely also like to answer any of those questions.
Yeah, so I think we're giving the word to our visionary in Germany, Professor Hermann Herbst. Would you take it from here?
Yeah, can you just, I'm trying to share my window here with you, my screen.
We see your window.
You see this? Okay.
Yes, you can see that.
Fine. So I would like to talk about the journey that we undertook for the last 20 years here in Berlin. So let's see whether this works. So why is this not? Sorry, so now, okay, my potential conflicts of interest. You see a number of companies that we are working with and over the time. And so the challenges for pathology in Germany, I think, as they are worldwide. We have an aging population, we have lots of new therapeutic options, new tests, and we are lacking pathologists and technologists. And so what can we do? We have to invest, of course, in personnel, and we have to invest in centralization of lab work, of automation, and we have to digitize everything in order to make it more transparent. So that's my agenda. I would like to talk mainly about the analytic phase and not that much of the pre-analytics that we are also busy with, and to the post-analytics. So let's see, that is Department of Pathology of Vivantes in Berlin. It's an agglomeration of 10 hospitals, and 5 of these hospitals, the larger ones, have pathology institutes. And these institutes were previously independent of each other, and all this has been combined under one roof. And finally, we have just one department with one larger institution and 4 smaller institutions, and we handle a number of cases and specimens, frozen sections, and so on, as you can see. And all this is done by 13 pathologists and 17 residents. So there's disparity between specialists and residents, but that is necessary for the time at the moment. So the question that we have everywhere is what should be done at what site, for which purpose, for by whom, with what type of instruments and technology. And then you need a lot of concepts for your network, for the IT, for the change management concept, because without people working together, you can't do anything. You need a quality management. You need standardizing everything. At workflow design, you have to think about high throughput technology, telepathology, molecular pathology, and so on. And all this has to be done at the same time. And the network concept that we have developed over time is that we keep presence at every one of the large hospitals, because we have to cover the local requirements, like frozen sections, like grossing, close by the operating hall, and we have to do the autopsies. You don't want to do this in a central facility, but rather you would like to have the clinicians looking on site. So, and all pathologists have to engage in teaching and education. This can only be done if everywhere teaching takes place. So, but we centralized the complex technology at one site that has enough structure and that has appropriate facilities in order to do automatization with high throughput technologies, with multifunction instruments. That's how we started with. And to do immunohistology only at one place, because otherwise you have a quality management problem. The same is for molecular pathology. And of course, then finally we engaged in whole slide imaging because we wanted to deliver the stain slides as soon as possible as a whole slide image. And also this allows us to use artificial intelligence, which will be not covered here. Okay, but I will cover a little bit digitally controlled archives for block slides and so on. So the quality management that we do is supported by the CAP, and we are since 1999, one institute is CAP accredited, and since 2015, all 5 facilities are CAP accredited, and hopefully this will also survive in 2 weeks. Then we have the next round of accreditation. And we started in 2008 with digital pathology in such a way that we acquired digital printers for labels and for cassettes, and that we cooperated with DARCO at that time in a tracking software. And that's how the workflow looks like when you have a staining machine, which is doing baking, staining, and cover slipping, and which is also drying. Then you have 3 or 4 steps that had been done manually with different systems. You have combined this in one. And this is a significant improvement because you have a number of mistakes would not happen anymore. So if you look at the next step, which is continuous workflow in the core facility, in this case with the Sakura workflow, embedding and block processing, and also in the satellites and in this in the central facility, we have conventional batching, and we have transportation of blocks of grossed sections to the central facility. And then since we use Sakura paraform cassettes, we can use these instruments in order to process the blocks. So as you can see here, this is really helping a lot because you save personnel, which you anyway, you're missing this, so you're dependent on such instruments and technologies. And of course, this can do things reliably at a much larger scale. And the next step, which is now very current, is the use of microtomes, automatic microtomes, which are not only microtomes, they are also doing the slide labeling. And they're doing this without any mistake, because the slide is printed inside the this microtome, and at the end, together with a proper H&E staining machine, you will get equally sectioned slides and properly stained slides, as you can see here. So that's quite a significant improvement, because it's not only a quality step forward, but it's also saving personnel. And particularly what is now coming up is a trimming microtome, which we will see hopefully in the next few months here in Berlin. So that's how this developed over, let's say, 15 years. So it's an array of modern technology, and which is still ready for any improvement. And you see that we have whole slide imaging, but we still have microscopes. And I do not think that you will be able to do everything with a microscope. Also, whole slide imaging, or the scanning process, is not can have problems, and mistakes can happen. So what does it look like? We want to extend the workflow control to the pre-analytic procedures. That means we want to have order entry. We have got this now, but there, of course, it has to work out properly, and we need innovative specimen collection procedures, and we need software which allows us to record warm and cold ischemia times and fixation intervals, and which requires also software interfaces to the LIS. And then we need innovative procedures in the analytic part of the workflow. We have to incorporate the molecular pathology better to the pathology LIS. Automated microtoming is something which I think there is a solution. And I think in future we will see that batch procedures will become less important, that we will have individual cassette processing in order not to contaminate any tissue. And then we will extend the workflow control to post-analytic procedures, which are also prone to mistakes. And that is, we want to have block handling systems, and something like that was for a short time on the market. And we want to have slide managing systems like this one here from XLab. So in the conclusion, we have started with multifunctional instruments, and the last one basically is the automatic microtome with this slide printing part. We need tight workflow control by barcoding and tracking, slide imaging, and so on. And of course, what is also digital is the reporting and speech recognition, which is could be much better than the one that we have at the moment. And digital archiving is also an issue for the next years. And what is also important and is standardized reporting with paired data elements, as it is recommended by the College of American Pathologists. All these are tools for maximizing efficiency, and this will help, hopefully, to ameliorate the growing lack of personnel. And this is just for the moment. We also work with or test robotics. Of course, there is already robotics here with the helping the Sakura Express system and the Autotech as a combination. And also we would like to have this little element here to run around in the lab and helping us. And because this is not available, it's busy in another galaxy, we use a small cobot from Denmark, which is sorting slides for us. So, and I think that's it. Thanks for your interest and for your attention. Thanks a lot. So I stop here at. So. No.
Thank you, Professor.
So
That was
can
a
you take it
highly,
over?
highly interesting presentation. What do you think of that?
I think what you've achieved, Professor Hurst, you and Vivantis over the many years now is something special. I know your journey is still in its infancy, really, because it's still only begun, right? While industry catches up and we get more technology, that's going to really help reinforce your journey. And so really, really thank you for sharing that with us. And again, well done with all of the work that you're doing over there. I think it truly is amazing.
And it's a lot of legacy.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of legacy to leave out there for others to follow.
And I like the way you've highlighted it. It is a collaboration between various different partners, industry, various different engagement with your internal teams, and it's pushing forward on that journey. And I think that's the message that I, for one, really take home from that. And I think you're right. It is about everyone working together to get to that endpoint. If anyone's got any questions for Professor Hurst, please ask so.
I'm saying, please could you explain the cobot more, as I'm not aware of what this is?
Could you please explain the cobot more, because he's not aware, the person's not aware of what it is. Would you be able to do that for us, please, Professor Hurst?
Yes, if you think about the magazines that are used for staining, these are usually magazines for 20 slides. You put this in the instrument and you take it out. Perhaps you have a cover slipper, but still you get it as in a magazine. And if you want to put this on a map for microscoping, then you have to handle this, and this is done manually. And this is not really, you don't need a brain for that. And we have people that have a brain and would like to use them, and not sitting there and taking things in and out. And that's something just a 2-year-old or 3-year-old boy or girl could do with some, it's a waste of personnel. And so you need to do automation. And this is definitely something a robot can do. And these robots can handle slides without breaking them. So we have tested this for thousands, and we have no broken slide. So if this is properly engineered, we can have a system which is handling from one instrument from company A to another set of magazines from a company B. And this will help to save personnel and will make the job more attractive, I think, than having in between manual work that you can do without switching off your brain.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Professor Hurst.
New question. Did you experience any challenges around LIMS integration?
If that's a question specifically just for the cover?
I think it's for,
or for all automation?
I think this is from Professor Herbst.
Okay. Did you incur any challenges around integrating any of your solutions into the LIMS?
Yeah, we had a homebrew LIMS previously, which was designed by a predecessor, and which ran alone and had also some integrated recording of barcodes, one-dimensional barcodes on paper, on stickers and so on. But the entire lab was still like the mail system 20 years ago. You put something in a post box and then you received this, and what happened in between was a miracle. And you couldn't ask what happened and where something happened, if happened anything that was a mishap. So, and this is now transparent with the barcoding, with the 2D barcodes. And this has been tracked with a different system. And now we have integrated this in a LIMS from Basel Data in Basel. And that works nicely. However, we have a lot of more wishes also to the LIS. and also which means also integration of molecular pathology, of the molecular laboratory system. And all this is still missing, I think. Perhaps on the world, at some place you have systems, you have solutions for that, but it's not easy to implement this in Germany because of the restrictions that apply to software and data handling and so on. So I think it will stay as a problem for quite a while.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one question for Amalie from the previous presentation.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Okay. Great to understand your learnings from other projects, from other deployment you have seen in create new sort of constraint earlier in the chain, ensure enough to feed automation machines, and creating new bottlenecks, backlogs after the automation phase. And any learnings on what teams have done to emerge this? So I will say that is an implementation phase time that could span, depending on, of course, the complexity of the system. Anything from maybe 1 to 6 months, depending on how engaged the facility is. And there could be bottlenecks in that period because we're not highly up to production, but some of it is in production. And I think that is good if the facility is counting on this. Having it in their planning, saying, okay, we know that we are integrating with new equipment and that the production rate capacity might at some point drop a bit.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you cannot have bigger changes in the facility and then have the same throughput. So it needs to be coordinated, yeah.
And also, do you find out, I think one of the parts of that question was when implementing automation or any sort of system like this, the upstream process, is there any sort of changes? Does that cause any changes, and does that cause any bottlenecks potentially in the upstream process because of this parallel workflow? And how do we mitigate those bottlenecks, those challenges, and how do we succinct it? How do we have it as a parallel workflow, but also dovetailing into the actual workflow?
That is not something that comes overnight. That takes time. And that might take time with, of course, the supplier speaking into, again, what am I desire with this system? And the desire can change. Of course, the desire can change. So maybe in the first, we are tackling some part of let's say, block production. And then after a certain amount of months, we are taking another area of the block production. So I think it's in the wheel, it could always change, but change will happen. There has to be changes in some of the pre-steps in order to make this work. And that could cause bottlenecks for a short period of time. But I can promise you that investing in this bottleneck for a short period of time could just have a tremendous output in the end.
And then that eventually sustains a continuous workflow, right? So I think part of the question was feeding the machine or feeding the bed of the automated kit is if you understand where the changes are and spend a bit of time of bringing them together and finding a collective way of the upstream process feeding into the automated solution that you're putting into your service, that will then create that consistent feeding of the unit. I think we have got James Wingfield and Zara from Cambridge and Liverpool, or Liverpool and Cambridge, who will talk about how, for instance, the automated sectioners have eradicated the backlog, and now they're running real-time tissue. And I think the thing is, it's what we've learned from in Denmark is we've had a site, Herlev, who nearly 10 years had the first unit put in, and they continually adding different tissue types and adding to the workflow because of these incremental changes. So I don't think you'll get to a point where you don't have enough to feed the solution because your workload is increasing 4 to 6 to 8% annually anyway. So I think that will always be the case. Coming back to a point that Amalie just made, I think it's essential working with suppliers to understand what these upstream processes are that need to be amended so that it then fits into that automation
And
workflow.
doesn't conflict, yeah.
And then if you've got any other automation that fits in behind it, how that then dovetails into that. And if I look at Denmark as being an example of that, we have got auto embedding in Denmark, and we've got auto sectioning in Denmark. And there is work that needs to be done to ensure that the two automated bits of kit work succinctly together to be able to give you a transformed workflow. And I think that's also key. It's engaging in both of that.
Yeah, because when you automate a step in the workflow, sometimes you're actually putting a focus elsewhere, right?
Sure.
So let's say you have an auto embedder. Your focus is now on the grossing part.
Yeah.
And there has to be a time span when you know that we are going to have to change our mindset. We're going to focus a little bit more on this step in order to create uniformity for the auto embedder that will just give a better result for our AS410, for instance. So it's around being aware that we cannot rush through these things.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we move on to next speaker is, given the current state of the commercial market, would it be better or more sensible to try and automate the entire pathway across a single project, or better to automate individual elements one at a time? If the latter, would there be a better order to do things? Mindful that paradigm shift needs the potentially very large things.
Yeah.
Very good question.
That's a very good.
And I think I've probably got a better chance of predicting the lottery numbers than being able to answer that in a coherent way. But because I think there's multiple ways you can look at that, right, Amelia? And I think you're probably more versed to be able to answer that, because Denmark have been on this automation journey longer than certainly the sites that I'm aware of in the UK. And as a country, Denmark have accelerated that automation journey. So how would you answer that question?
I think it really, differs from site to site how keen is the facility for change. Because if you're changing the entire workflow, the entire work path with automation, there's going to be a lot of changes in a small amount of time. Mm-hmm. And maybe that staff here is going to be really, concerned about these changes because so much is happening in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And it's also very difficult to troubleshoot and meet expectation to have that reel again if you're changing so much at the same time.
Yeah.
Not saying you can have two instruments coming in at the same time that feeds into each other, because I think that could potentially happening, but changing a lot of things from sample intake to sample resigning at the same time requires to have a really good schedule out plan and a really transparency for the department for that to succeed.
Sure.
In my opinion.
I think, I think there's an element around that question is, everyone take this how it's meant, is that we need to have grown up conversations around that topic, because you need collaboration, right? You need collaboration from industry, from different partners, different suppliers, and then you need collaboration internally in your facility to be able to do that. And I think, and I think coming back to your point is, how many sites are ready to be able to do one or the other, or do the whole hog, so to speak. And I think there's a part of me that says I would love to be able to find a facility where we can go in and we can implement all of the levels of automation that we have and create this exemplar site of what could look like. I think, but what we need to really be mindful of is that we need to look to see what parts of our service, what parts of our workflow where we've got the biggest pinch points, the biggest backlogs, the biggest potential where we need to have this transformational change happening, and then doing that one bit at a time and seeing how that goes. And I think there's an argument for both. Really good question. Thanks for bringing it.
It is, but maybe also going back to the supply chain. So let's say you cannot have a supplier that fits everything from sample intake to resigning samples. It's going to be a lot of logistics around that, a lot of matrix that has to be met. And again, how could you then define your focus, right? Because if things are starting to shift, how are you actually, sticking to the plan? Because it can so easily be interrupted.
I think it's a good question that I would like to ask probably Professor Hurst and James Wingfield and Zara to actually give some thought to on if you had a blank canvas, if you had the ability to create it all in one go, or would you do it as a piecemeal? I mean, I think that is probably a better way of answering the question. So could we start with maybe Professor Hurst, if you'd like to answer that question first, and then come back over to James and Zara.
So could you kindly repeat the question?
Certainly. The question is that considering the commercial complexities and the landscape, would you recommend facilitating automation all in one go throughout your service, or would you do it as a piecemeal, solution by solution?
So we did this as a piecemeal because all the instruments were not available 15 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's we looked at companies that would like to help us and to engage in our journey to improve the workflow. And of course, it started with a cover stainer from Darko as a multifunctional instruments, and then came one by one also in the molecular pathology. And I think you have to do this one by one, because otherwise you will lose your colleagues. They will just give up, and not everyone is able to cope with the many problems that arise when you start with a new system. There's nothing problem free.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Hurst. If we can go back to maybe
James,
to James, if you'd like to give some input on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So from my perspective, it's a complex thing to do, isn't it? We've also implemented piecemeal what we've got so far. However, if I had a blank canvas and could do it from scratch, I probably would do that, so that and also with an unlimited budget, obviously. So this could all be implemented and integrated together as one. And but I think ideally you'd want to be running your existing clinical service whilst implementing at the same time, so that you can ensure that your validation requirements are met and don't end up with issues down the line. But I completely agree with the comment around it being a huge amount of transfer. We're at that paradigm shift. Trying to make huge amounts of change all at once can be very challenging for staff, and can be very challenging in the UK environment as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
And Zara, over to you.
I think, again, for us as well, I think implementing as a piecemeal personally is probably a better option, because, with changes, especially in histology at this moment in time, we are at a period where there's various technology that's now coming to light, which wasn't existing even 5 years ago. And, through any change that you're going through, you've got to go through this whole change management process with your staff, with your process, your colleagues, your suppliers, service users, and so forth. So for me, if you are going to a full-blown change, you've got to make sure that you're adapting it so you're able to adjust to your performance, because with any changes, you will have a drop in performance, a drop in terms of your staff engagement as well. So you've got to take all of this in consideration to make sure that whatever you're implementing is done, I suppose, based on whatever is your priority first, where I think Martin mentioned about where your concerns are. So personally for us, in terms of when we've implemented automation, it has been done through different stages. Some of it based on external requirements, when funding was made available, in terms of what priority we were given. But that has also allowed us to be able to, implement the change, make sure it's continuous, it's constant, before we bring in a different variable. Otherwise, you can imagine a service running at hundreds of different variables, and this complex technology is currently in place to allow you to have more of an efficient, effective, whilst you're running as a parallel service, potentially side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting question, and I think we can probably go back and forth on this for the rest of the webinar. So thanks, whoever answered that. Yeah, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next presentation, we're going to go over to James Wingfield from Liverpool. Sorry, LCL, Liverpool Clinical Laboratories. I think that's what it is. Sorry, James. I really butchered that. But over to you, James, and if you can share your screen and go away with your presentation, please.
Sure, thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks, James.
Hopefully that's loading. Can people see my slides?
Yeah.
Yes, we've got that.
Okay, great. I think the other thing I wanted to say as well, just on the previous conversation before that last question as well, is that I think as leaders, we've got to be cognizant of the fact, the role that we play. I mean, Emily mentioned, PDSA and ADCAR as a couple of models, and I'll mention one on my next slide as well. But I think they're all important. They've all got application. I think we've got to recognize that we're working in complex systems. We've got to be agile. We've got to be applying lean methodology. Kaizen, whatever it is that approach works for you to manage that incremental change or transformational change at whatever time it may be. So I think really important for leaders to be developing those skill sets within the NHS, because they're essential to manage this type of change.
Good point.
Okay, so if I move on. Does that move my slide?
No.
No?
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry. Let me stop sharing and I'll share it a different way. Apologies.
Please don't be. It's the challenges of the modern world that we work in, where we can remotely log in from everywhere and do things. This old dog doesn't like these new tricks. So that's just me personally.
Okay, is that better?
We can see it, but yes, it's
yeah,
changed.
yeah.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Apologies for that. Right. So I thought I'd just try and focus a bit more on the practical applications and actually the actual implementation for people, as hopefully that will be helpful for what they're about to embark on over the next sort of 12, 18 months. So I think some of the points, as I mentioned before, that Emily touched on around actually implementing change are really important. I really need to highlight the importance of communication, and hopefully I'm not teaching people how to suck eggs here. But this is a Mendelow's stakeholder matrix. You might use a formal method like this, or you might have other methods to do that. But really important to know who your stakeholders are and how are you communicating with them. I think the process of deploying the AS410s and the AT into our laboratory has sort of raised some considerations that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of, and really highlighted the importance of estates and facilities. For example, we had to consider load-bearing capabilities of the floor, and whether we needed to be putting spreader plates in. We had to run compressed air from the roof and compressed air lines through the labs to install the ASs, or we didn't have to, but we chose to because we had the capabilities. We've had issues with heat gain in a particular area of the laboratory because of the way that our building management system and airflow has been designed, and we've had to make changes to that. So they're all considerations that are really important as you're deploying novel automation into your services, and things that shouldn't be underestimated and should ideally be anticipated as well. So really important that you're building the right relationships, communicating with the right people at the right time in the right ways, because there's so many ways for these types of projects to go wrong, and really important as a leader and a manager to be managing those. So dissection essential. I think it's really important that we get the basics right. Really what it is, what goes in is what you get out, and I think many laboratories still have challenges with trying to fit too much tissue into a cassette. this has issues not only with processing, but then also with automated sectioning, and then down the line now digital pathology as well. So really essential to get those basics right at dissection to ensure that you've got the margins, not only so that your processing is accurate, but that the quality flows through all the downstream processes as well. Some of the other considerations that we've had to make, so we do have quite a significant volume of mega blocks in use within our service. Obviously, we can't section these with the auto sectioners, but we have run into workflow issues whereby part of the case is in a mega block and part of the case is on standard size blocks, and the standard size blocks through the AS have gone out through staining and to the casing up bench, whereas the mega block is still sat waiting to be cut at the microtome. And actually, you know, it could have been more beneficial for us to put that one mega cassette into 4 standard size cassettes, and even though that would have resulted in you know, more cassettes overall, it would have got the case through the laboratory faster. But then there's the knock-on consideration down the end of what the pathologist wants and how they view that tissue. So I think that's an important consideration if you're looking at auto embedders, auto sectioners. As I mentioned, processing quality not only important, but also considering the timing of your runs and how they're coming off. So some labs might be running with everything coming off at 5, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, or you might have your surgical resections coming off slightly later in the morning, with your biopsies coming off first thing in the morning. And what you don't want to be doing with a piece of automated equipment is have it sitting there not being used. So we have altered some of our processing schedules to ensure that we've always, now that we've cleared our backlog, got surgical blocks coming off early in the morning so that they can be trimmed and put onto the AS so that that's constantly churning away in the background. And that then gives our staff the time to manually cut the biopsies and still get things out in a continuous flow manner. Embedding, again, an essential, correct size mold, correct orientation, knife angle, tissue has to be flat. Just, things that are the bread and butter for histology, but really important for you to consider, have you actually got this right? Do your staff have the skill sets if you're manually embedding? How can you improve that? Because they're essential for auto sectioning. And it may be that you've got auto embedders and this isn't so much of a problem for you, but a consideration to think of. Trimming, I think there was a comment before about whether you have a small core team that is operating the automation or whether you have a wider team, and I think this is an important consideration as well. The staff that are frequently utilizing an instrument like the AS will understand in depth what their capabilities are, what they can and can't cope with, and therefore by manually trimming those staff manually trimming the blocks, they actually are able to triage them at that stage as well, and you could reduce potential issues if your staff know what can be cut on the auto sectioners and what potentially needs to be cut manually. And then I guess the final thing we also touched on briefly before was integration. So how are you integrating these pieces of equipment with your LIMS, with your tracking solution, with your image management system for digital pathology? Perhaps not historically considerations that people might have needed to have made within histology being quite manual, but we see in blood sciences and infection and immunity these sort of middleware solutions, full integration, end to end. It's business as usual now, but it's quite novel still in many areas of histopathology. So a really important consideration for people to be thinking about. So our validation approach, another great consideration in the UK, UCAS, how do you satisfy the powers that be? How do you get these pieces of equipment accredited, validated? So we had a multi sort of stage approach here where we sectioned various different types of tissue through the ASs. We determined optimal parameters within the instruments, optimal section thickness, and then we made sure that we had consultant engagement. So our workforce is subspecialized here at LCL, so we did need multiple consultants viewing and assessing the quality of the sections that were being generated, providing feedback, and that process took us a little bit of time. But we did get through there in the end, and finally, once we determined those optimal parameters for each tissue type, we cut diagnostic patient material in parallel. So we cut them with the auto trimmers and we cut them with the manual microtomes, and then a comparison was done on those sections before being signed off by a consultant as the sections being comparable or better quality. And this was just some of the approach that we took. I think you can probably tell which sections in the top left there of the kidney were manually sectioned and which sections were cut with the ASs, looking at the placement and the orientation of the tissue on the slides. The same with the prostates. We sent out feedback forms with every case that had been cut with the auto trimmers to give the consultants the opportunity to provide that feedback to us and allow us to make changes if we needed to. And then we've kept obviously records of what the section quality was scored both with the manual and the automated microtome. And this formed part of our validation report. As we got to our scheduled month, profile month for accreditation, and we moved to the 2022 standard in December. At the same time, we added our AS microtomes to as an extension to scope at that stage. The documentation that we provided to UCAS was a detailed validation report. We had associated risk assessments, SOPs, training and competency records, maintenance records. We had some bench flow or bench guides made, and also consumable checking lists. So these were just a summary of the documents that we provided. Depending on how you've set up your labs and how your quality teams are working, you might have slightly different requirements that or different documentation that meet the requirements of UCAS, but this is what we did, and that's Harry and Beth there, who were essential in the accreditation of the microtomes for our service. So I mentioned Agile before. I think it's really important to be able to pivot and address problems as they arise, and do this in a timely manner and a calm manner, not panicking. We had several issues throughout our deployment, things that we hadn't thought of before we actually installed. So our trust likes to test their backup generators every Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. And this was causing all the circuit breakers within the lab to trip on a regular basis. We hadn't installed UPSs at that time, and we didn't have a maintained supply, a single maintained supply for the laboratory block. So we did end up deploying standalone UPSs. We had issues with our slide types that had been in use for several years in the service. And that meant that we were unable to utilize the ASs overnight, and during the day they required constant attention if there were slides stuck together, and that then caused the whole unit to stop. So we had to change our slide type, and we did that without too much of an issue, and that fully mitigated the problems that we were seeing. Printing quality was an issue, just required a bit of a tweak in print settings, and again the change to the slide type and the different frosted end made the whole world of difference for us there. Staffing levels, so we've had several periods of time where we've had high levels of sickness coinciding with annual leave, and then that's led to flow issues and some challenges, but invariably we've been able to move staff around to address those, but another thing to consider. And obviously resistance to change, it's a big concern for us all. It was touched on briefly earlier in the presentation, but this just highlights the real importance of that sort of active, regular engagement, trying to reinforce the benefits, and providing reassurance that people are not going to lose their jobs, and that these shouldn't be seen as complete replacements, because they're not at this stage. These are some of the benefits that we've seen, and I think really important to use this both in your communications strategies for staff who are actively involved in using automated instruments, but also for stakeholders outside of the laboratory and non-technical stakeholders. How are you actually highlighting the benefits and quantifying the benefits of the deployment to them? And I think this is what your quality teams, your divisional management teams, finance teams, NHS England are going to want to be seeing from the investment that they're making into services. What's that return on investment? How are we making a benefit to patients? How are we making a benefit to the lab? So this was one of the ways that we attempted to do this. It did require quite a lot of manual data collection, but it was worthwhile in the end. So the start of the graph, the left-hand side there, is from January 2024, and that demonstrates what our block backlog was in histology, which peaked in around the start of July, end of June, start of July, at around 3,500 blocks. And then you can see quickly there the grey bars as we upscaled the routine use of the AS microtomes, that block backlog quickly decreased as we approached throughout summer, and then towards the end of August. We had a couple of periods of downtime, which were sort of learning curves for us as well, and then that resulted in the block backlog increasing again. But then quickly, as we got the ASs back online, that decreased again, and then we've pretty much maintained a zero block backlog since November, December last year. So on a daily basis, we're running between 410 and 480 blocks across the two instruments. That's not at the full capacity. We know we could probably get more, but we haven't needed to get more through the ASs, and that's okay for us at the moment. We've got a plan to increase the number of tissue types and protocols that we will use, which we think will push us to our full capacity probably before the end of this year. Between June and December, we cut 58,000 blocks, and roughly 49-50% of our laboratory workload now is processed on the ASs on a daily basis. Although recently we've had sort of between 1,000 and 1,200 blocks coming off the processors. So that's not quite 50%, but I think that's just a bit of a spike in workload that we've been seeing. This was our histology laboratory turnaround time, so from specimen receipt through to the case being available for the consultant. It's the data collection is not fantastic. We don't have a robust tracking, enterprise tracking solution within the lab, but the methodology is consistent throughout the year. But that sort of accounts for a lot of that spikiness. But yeah, what this graph shows is in the blue line, that's our all samples turnaround time or laboratory throughput, and the black line is our urgent samples, urgent biopsies. So we can see that between January and July, we had a mean laboratory turnaround time of 4.1 days for all samples. And then after the deployment of the AS microtomes between August and January, we had a mean turnaround time of 3.1 days through the laboratory, and the same with urgent biopsies, 2.2 days to 1.7 days. So this was just something that we did to try and demonstrate the impact that the deployment of the automation has had on the laboratory. This is not to say that we don't have other bottlenecks and issues elsewhere within the service. We've seen staff sickness and maternity leave affect us in dissection, which has caused some issues in dissection. But then because we've got the throughput in the main laboratory, we can quickly get back on top of that. And we've also obviously got some clinical reporting shortages as well, which then has an impact on our end-to-end turnaround time because of some delays there. But I think really important for you to be considering, how do you quantify the impact of what's being deployed in your laboratory, and how do you demonstrate that you've got that return on investment? So those are some of the quantitative benefits. We did see a reduction in sickness absence as well, so 9.5% in July down to 4.9% in December. But there's also qualitative benefits as well. So we just did a brief survey of staff, and we tried to quantify from them how did they feel when we announced that we were going to be deploying these automated microtomes, and then how did they feel afterwards, having worked with these for several months. And the feedback from the staff is is evident in the comments that are there on the screen. But that sort of qualitative feedback is another way that you can be quantifying that return on investment. So we had several aims that we wanted to achieve from our deployment. So we wanted to reduce our block backlog. We wanted to free staff time up to enable us to redeploy them to other areas of the lab. We wanted to reduce reported repetitive strain injury and musculoskeletal related absences. And we wanted to improve our 10-day turnaround time. And ultimately, working in the larger system, we wanted to see impact on the 28-day and the 62-day pathway performance percentages as well. So we've achieved and able to demonstrate achievement of most of those. What we haven't done yet is the work with the Cancer Alliance to look at that end-to-end 28-day, 62-day pathway performance and a reduction in the associated histology breaches. So where a patient has breached because of a histology delay, we just haven't done that because of workload and capacity, but hopefully we'll get a chance to do that at some point this year. So we've got several next steps that we're wanting to achieve with our deployment. We have been operating these instruments in offline mode. We're desperate to get them online because we know that that's going to give us far greater benefits than what we've already seen. We operate with Telepath currently, so the integration with Telepath, the capabilities of that as a LIMS are not fantastic, but our intention is to utilize Mirth as an integration engine and to actually integrate the instruments with a SQL backend database rather than the LIMS itself. That will then enable us to implement a business intelligence dashboard, which hopefully will give us more insight as to areas that we can focus on to further improve. We are just adjusting protocols and implementing new protocols now for us to utilize sticky slides rather than the standard slides. And this will allow us to section brain, IHC control slides, special slides, but also to then look at implementing protocols such as sentinel nodes, where we've got serial sections and a mix of immunohistochemistry and H&Es and special stains with the inflammatory skins. So just some acknowledgements there. Really draw attention to our histology lab team. They've, we wouldn't have gotten this far without them, and it's easy for me to sit here and talk to you today about the benefits, but the only reason we've got the benefits is because of the hard work that the people on the ground have actually done. So a huge thank you to them, and then obviously to the people that have supported from our organisation, our pathology network, and NHS England, and also obviously the ACTS lab team as well, because they've also been instrumental in allowing us to actually deploy this. So really highlights what was being said before about that partnership with industry and how that can benefit the NHS. And I think that's essential as we sort of ride this paradigm shift wave. So thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So James, can you give details of percentage downtime of the microtome, and can it section all tissue types?
So off the top of my head, I can't give you details of downtime. I might defer to Amelie on that one if she can.
Yeah,
I'll have to have a
absolutely.
think. And then in terms of the tissue section or tissue types, pretty much everything. We haven't sectioned bone. Would recommend that you probably don't try and section bone unless you're really sure that it's completely decalcified.
Yeah.
It's just best not to. We avoid tissues with calculi in them, so we will manually section prostate, sometimes some of our lung blocks or uterine minifibroids, that sort of thing, where we're really struggling. But for the most part, we get most tissue types with really good quality sections going through the instruments.
Thank you, James. I think the question around downtime, I would be absolutely lying to you and I said there wasn't any downtime, but then I don't think any manufacturer, any supplier can stand with an honest heart and say, we've got a perfect instrument, there's no downtime, it's going to run 100% of the time and everyone's going to be happy, because that's not the case. And I think everyone's been doing this long enough now to understand that and realize that we do have downtime. I think the beauty of this system is that in most cases you will still carry on the rest of the workload. So the rest of the, if there's a problem with one block, you'll be able to section sort of the remaining blocks. We have had some issues, but we've got local service engineers and we're adding to that team. We've got international service engineers. We've got, I think in total at hand in deployment throughout all of our business units, in excess of 10 to 15 engineers that we can deploy at any point when we need to. We've got application specialists locally in the UK. Again, we are adding to that team because, it's all great selling you bits of kit, but we've got to keep it up and running. We've got to keep it working. We've got to keep it working continuously to be able to get that workflow. Around tissue types, Amelia is going to be the best person to give you that answer. And maybe elaborate more on downtime.
So I don't want to exclude any tissue types. I think it's a matter of how the pre-analytics is working around that. So at the LTL, they are not doing bone, but maybe there are sites where they are highly treating the bone material to a point where it could actually be put on the system. So I don't want to exclude anything. I'm just going to say that when you are, again, controlling your pre-analyticals, that will be the key factor of how your success rate is going to be with the ACE. In terms of downtime, I think we could divide it a little, because usually in the beginning we see a lot of user errors, mistakes, changing consumables that we are not aware of, and that could, as James is telling, cause issues that could lead to a technical issue. And this is what we have seen a lot, that staff is on this learning curve, and while they are on this learning curve, sometimes that can cause interruption of workflow. But we are really aiming that there is service provided within 24 hours, and this is a huge aim for us, because we know that downtime is so vulnerable to you. And that's why we are trying to emphasize that we are having the manpower such to take care of it, so we don't expand into having long hours without.
Absolutely, and I think also the maintenance around the solution is also very critical. Yeah. We've got very small tolerances, millimeters worth of stuff, and you've got wax that's been sectioned and it's debris everywhere. If that's not cleaned and maintained, which is around about 20-30 minutes every morning, just to do that, make sure it is, and while you're doing that, you're changing the consumables and you're making sure you're ready for the run. I think that helps a little bit with some of the downtime.
I think we have to look at automation as we're not it's only as great as we're doing it, and we're feeding into it. So when we're doing, for instance, manually sectioning, we are compensating a lot for different reasons on the process, a lot of wax on the cassettes, barcodes that cannot be read. For automation, it treats everything the same. It goes for a cassette printer, it goes for embedder, it goes for the auto sectioner. Everything has to be uniform, and this is what I came back to. The more you can prepare your lab for uniformity, the smoother it's just going to be.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Before giving the word to Sarah, just one more question.
Yes.
Easy one, James, for you. Your lab impact turnaround time days graph, are these working days or calendar days, please?
Calendar days.
Thank you.
I think we just had another question pop up. Okay. Okay. We're now going to move on. We have got your questions logged. We will come back to them. Just to let, there was a question that was asked whether or not we would share this webinar because some people have had to log off. We will do so. There is a recording that's being done and it will be accessible to anyone that has logged in to this and registered for the webinar.
Maybe add to that, I think we will compose some of the presentation, for instance, my presentation, so you're able to send that out if anyone is interested in that.
Perfect. We're now going to hand you over to Zara, who is the histo lab manager over at CUH. Over to you, Zara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that clearly.
Yes.
We've got that. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you again. So yes, as Matt said, I'm Zara, the lab manager for histopathology at in Cambridge. What I'm going to just go through today in terms of where we started with our journey for automation, how we got there, and how some of the equipment that we have implemented is going so far, and any advice or any learnings that I can share with you. So again, why automation? So we started with the past few years with poor turnaround time. We've seen that there's been an increase in activity. However, our staff and skills that we had in the department, we couldn't get to the level that we required. As a result, that meant the performance was much lower than we needed. We started looking at how we can develop a performance strategy, and we've also been working towards a consultancy service to help us through this journey. So we started first in terms of devising an improvement roadmap. So we wanted to see, before we deploy any changes, whether it's automation or non-automation changes, what exactly was our problem. So we are quite lucky, I think it's CUH, that we've got access to a lot of data. That meant we were able to understand where our bottlenecks were, where our delays were in the lab or reporting side. We also looked at data in terms of our staffing, what our capacity was, what our certainty was, and also what we required to do in order to be able to develop that. So essentially, this was our principle to be able to deliver this change as part of our improvement process. Part of that, again, is then looking at our capacity planning, looking at the different parts of the laboratory, how we were in terms of staffing, what exactly did we have in both of those processes. We then moved on to identify different work stream, understanding what is urgent. So I think going back to, what the situation that we were in is we were dealing with large backlogs, poor performance, and staff shortages. That allowed us to then develop a proper phase plan to be able to get to a position where we do not have a backlog, we improve our turnaround time, but also get us to a point where we can increase our capacity and also develop further. So part of that was in terms of business as usual, but also creating some capacity where we can look at improvements or onboarding on new technologies and automation. In order to then facilitate this, we essentially drew up a process map of different functions. We looked at where the inefficiencies that could be made through changes in process, through changes in people's or workflow behaviors, but also then started looking at where we had a gap in staffing, but also looking at what technologies out there which could potentially be automating that area. So you can see the little robots where we've identified different parts of the process in terms of what could be automated. It led us to engaging with different suppliers, but also other laboratories in terms of what is out there. So a big part of, I suppose, the next steps for us is understanding what technology was out there, what would be the most beneficial for us as a laboratory, what is it that was already been trialed. So we had the opportunity of seeing different technology in different labs and relating that to our own process or our own laboratory in terms of what was most suitable. Based on that, then we then went on to developing an automation strategy. So looking at the different processes, identifying what could be automated and what could be going through a manual workflow. And I think we kind of touched a little bit on that in terms of how you divide those parallel workflows. So essentially, based on the technology that is available, there will always be an automation pathway, a manual pathway. So they're always going in and out based on what technology you're deploying in your laboratory, but also what technology is currently available. I think using that was actually really key to get executive engagement and buy-in. So obviously, as you're all aware, with any trust as well, in order for you to be able to develop or deploy or get any business case approved, it is key to get your senior team or your executive team engaged or believe in the vision that you're prepared to deploy. So our automation strategy was then presented in terms of to the executive team, not necessarily asking for funding when it changes, but almost telling them the vision, which was positively appreciated by that team. The next thing then for us, which was really key, is staff engagement. So we started this journey not recently or overnight. So part of our performance improvement, I think since 2021, 2022, we started looking at how we can have a leadership development program, a change management program for our existing histology staff. So we started with our senior team, which was almost looking at, okay, if we're going to be going through a change, what exactly do we need? How do we get prepared, staff involved into this? What do they think is the other issues? And almost developing a vision with them. And we did that with all of our band 6 and above, which I think was really key for us when we started making changes to workflow, making changes, introducing new technology. One of the other thing as well is, I think when we looked at implementing it as well, is engaging all your staff. It's not necessarily specific banding or your senior team. I think what was really key for more of a successful implementation is actually involving your junior staff, because they're the ones on the bench, they know what they're doing, they can understand what the problems are. So getting them part of that vision, getting them part of implementing or changing the workflows and also maintaining that was really critical for us. So at the moment, in some of the technologies that we're getting, I've got my band 4s, my band 5s registered staff who are actually running the service. The other thing as well was important is engage a clinical team. So we've got very good clinical leadership with working alongside the operational team, which was key, in order to drive that, because anything that we do impacts on the patient care, impacts on the clinical team. So getting them to see that vision that we are making changes to improve the service, both in terms of performance as well as quality improvement. So next thing is, I just want to touch in terms of, okay, based on that, then what did we decide to implement and why were we implementing this automation? For us, we are quite a high throughput, high volume lab, so we deal with, I think, similar numbers to both Liverpool and Germany. So over 80,000 cases. We deal about 280,000 blocks a year and about 500,000 slide, and that keeps growing. The way we're working based on the workflow and the process mapping that we've done, histology naturally does a lot of batching. So we wanted to eliminate that, and basically the aim is to work more towards a continuous workflow to ensure that there is reduced pressure on the service, but also allows it to be able to work towards better performance. We also wanted to make sure that there is reduced pressure on staff. So we've been working with a over 20% vacancy rate. Even up to now, we are fluctuating between 13 to 15% vacancy rate, and the work obviously doesn't stop. There's more complex work. There's more of it as well, which was adding additional pressure on staff. There's increased sickness. You've got a growing backlog, which is not very good for the staff morale. And the other thing that we also wanted to do is, the automation needs to be implemented in a way where we're able to release staff or better use staff to upskill them, but also use them at their top of their competencies and not spending a lot of time on a lot of non-throughput related tasks. And then also finally is looking at how we can improve quality, because at the moment any non-conformity, any deviation, or any poor quality, that also takes a lot of time in order to be able to address those non-conformities. So it's not necessarily just changing or automating your throughput-related activities, I think our vision is to make sure that we are reducing time so then we can use our staff, utilize our staff better for their own development, but also for the service development as well. So the first thing, obviously, that we looked at was the AS410. So we implemented the O2 sectioner first. I think one of the reasons we didn't think we would be implementing it as one of our first technology, because at that point in time we did not really have the space for it. But we were lucky where the trust had funding available, which we bid for, and we ended up getting the O2 sectioners first. The O2 sectioner, I think, at that point in time, so we got them around 23, 24. We had one of our major bottlenecks was the microtomy area, where there was a large volume of blocks waiting in the backlog, which I'm talking about over 6,000 blocks. So the O2 sectioner allowed us to reduce or eliminate this backlog, but also some of the benefits of it, and one of the reasons we also went for that is it mitigated the staff shortage in that area. Microtomy itself is quite a repetitive task, which, we had a lot of RSI-related injury or sickness to staff. By implementing that, it allowed us to be able to reduce that. The other thing as well, as we're going through automation journey, we're also going through a digitalization journey. What the sectioner also allowed us to do is to have more standardization within your sections, your H&A, leading to better digital images, but also better quality staining, rather than having different variability in thickness and so forth. And the other thing as well with technology is looking at your non-throughput related tasks and how do you make sure there's improved quality. The system allows you to do on-demand slide printing, and also it tracks that as well for you. So there is no risk of you putting the wrong section on the wrong tissue, which then can lead to potentially detrimental effect on the patient care and delays in terms of the report. More recently, it was only a few weeks ago, we've also got the O2 trimmer, which is going to be complementing the O2 sectioner. And again, the aim is to be able to use that for similar reasons, but at the moment we're still optimizing it. The other types of automation that we looked at, it was kind of more like leveling up automation. So we've got cassette printers, but they were being used as batch printing. But also the type of printer that we had, again, at the time in terms of printing cassettes, it was an older model, which means in your dissection areas, if you're dissecting, you're waiting for quite a long time to be able to get your cassette, so you'll have reduced productivity. So we moved both towards laser printing, both actually on our, at the beginning, for the time being, on our cassettes, which has significantly improved productivity. There's less waiting times at cut-ups, which again, you're gaining that productivity in order for staff to be working on something else, which is more throughput and more productive. There's minimal maintenance requirement for these as well, which means, again, you're making a savings in terms of your staffing and productivity elsewhere. We've also just recently got your laser slide printers, which is not currently deployed yet, but that's our next step for implementation. So where are we with our implementation? So our O2 section is live at this moment in time, and we have got an interface with our LIMS, and we do use Epic Beaker at this moment in time. It's a unidirectional interface. When we started with the O2 section for a good 6-7 months, we did not have the LIS interface, which meant that we could not see the full benefit of the O2 sectioner. The LIS prevented you from creating other batching or relabeling in order for us to be able to link it to our digital system, which means then I think once it was implemented, that meant we were able to process things in more of a continuous way. At the moment, we are processing about 20 to 30% of our histology blocks, but we would like to continue improving and increasing the use of the AS410. The O2 trimmer at the moment in time, again, we can see that already the benefit I can actually bring to the team. So with AS410 at the moment, you've got to manually trim your blocks, which again requires staffing, but with the O2 trimmer, that again allows you to further reduce your batching system, allows you to reduce the staffing requirements or associated with the trimming and better utilize them in a more manual process. So as we're getting more work, we're also getting our dissection or more manual, which cannot quite be automated now. You can use them better in that. There's other work that we're getting in terms of supporting genomics work. And our immunohistochemistry keeps growing, which we know we need more staff there. So it allows us to be able to train up staff in areas where you cannot fully automate. Our cassette printers are live in action, but they're not interfaced yet. So again, the other vision is we have more on-demand printing for better quality improvement. At the moment, we're still doing batch printing for the cassettes, which can lead to mislabeling errors. And again, there's time associated with that you spend on nonconformities and incident, which could have a detrimental impact on patient care if it's not picked up at the right time. And the next step for us will be the same for slide printers, so having them on-demand printing at each station to reduce a lot of it is not necessarily the time again, but also to make sure that we're eliminating mislabeling errors, which helps you with your downstream process as well for your QC step. And overall, these are time that you're saving in your overall process, which would help you in terms of your improved turnaround time. So if I talk a little bit specifically about the AS410 in terms of our steps to implementing the AS410, the staff engagement was very, very important. I know Emily spoke a little bit earlier about having a core team. So I think the success of us implementing that first was, apart from the stakeholder engagement, we've been engaging staff even prior to us implementing any of those technologies by having departmental meetings, talking through them in terms of what we found with different labs, different suppliers. And when we did get the equipment in, we started, we set up a core team. So you've got some of the section leaders who were implemented in terms of super users, but the day-to-day implementation and usage of the AS410 has been done by some of my non-registered and with some of my registered staff. We've kept them consistent for nearly a year now, and then slowly bringing in more people. And I haven't had any negativity. I think they were the ones who were actually championing this. Rather than me telling my staff this is a good idea, I think they were the ones who could see the benefit of having the AS410. This allowed us to also upskill the staff or better utilize them, and has definitely improved their staff morale. And then a part of it, then we also went through a process map as well. So we implemented the AS410 just to understand what the gaps were, where we could be making any changes in terms of our process. It was also very important for us to identify any changes upstream or downstream. So with any automation, you've got to ensure that you're feeding good quality to get a good quality out. So looking at the quality of wax. So I know we spoke to the Axe Lab team just to understand what the best practice in other labs were. Our tissue sampling or embedding quality was quite key for us to make sure this is correct or being done correctly before we implemented anything. We've had very good training from the Axe Lab team, and I think that support was really key, and that engagement with the suppliers was really key in order for us to be able to show those improvements. And then yes, we went through our validation and QMS sign-off, and then started more of a phased rollout with different tissue type. Just picking up on some of those points, I think the first key was review of the workflow. So we had a proposed workflow in terms of what we thought would look like in terms of how blocks are coming from embedding. And then looking at, as we've implemented the workflow, we've had to adapt it a few times in order to ensure that this was being done in the most effective manner. So we started off using the AS410 as a standalone, so we had to adapt our workflow to that until we got the LIS integration, which allowed us to have more of a continuous flow. Again, our verification validation process, one of the key things again is engaging new pathologists with it, making sure that they are engaged in terms of the quality of the material, the quality of the section. And we've definitely seen a lot more standardization and improvement in terms of the quality of the section that is being sectioned on the AS410 compared to manual microtomy. So again, a lot of it is how you're working with your suppliers as well. I think for us, the success for that is listen to the feedback that we're getting from Axe Lab, the feedback that we're getting from other labs who are implementing it, and having this continual feedback loop for improvement. Just if we're finding anything, how do we feed back to the supplier, and also the other way around as well. So again, with any technology, as you're implementing something so complex, it takes time for staff to get used to it. So I know we talked a little bit about maintenance earlier. So at the beginning, in order for us to start troubleshooting with it took us quite long to get used to that. But staff, I think with the support with the XLab team, are able to troubleshoot any kind of errors, or they're able to go through the maintenance much quicker than they used to be. So what have we achieved through this? I think beginning with last year, we had a massive backlog, so more than 10,000 blocks worth of backlog towards May 2024. So we went through this journey in terms of performance improvements while also implementing some of those technologies, mainly the AS410. And we are currently at this point where we do not have a backlog. So the blocks that we currently have are business as usual or work in progress. We were relying heavily on outsourcing, which is about 20% of our activity back in May 2024, to currently we are using just under 5% of activity. And the reason we're using outsourcing at this moment in time is we are going through a moment of transformation because we're scheduled to be moving to a new facility in a few months' time. So we're still using outsourcing to be able to mitigate that. Part of our case in order to be able to get this approved, so we looked at what efficiency we could be making. We were able to save 2 band 3s from our budget, which meant that we were able to run the service, improve productivity without the additional requirement of staffing, despite the high staff vacancy rate. Our turnaround time as well has improved, so we were about 40 to 50% in 10 days end-to-end turnaround time to currently we're running about 75 to 80% within 10 days. And similar to James, we've also have the other inefficiencies in the lab. The facility that we currently have at the moment is not the most effective or efficient lab at the moment in the lab, which means then we are not able to further improve in terms of our turnaround time until we move to a new facility, which is much more streamlined. So the other points, we've also seen improvement in terms of the quality of the sections. There's less recut rates. It eliminates any mislabeling errors, so you're saving quite a significant amount of time rather than people sticking the wrong label in the wrong slide or picking up the wrong slide and the wrong tissue, because this is all done within the equipment. It reduces the manual task, which meant that also there's a lot. We've got less RSI-related sickness. It has definitely improved our work morale. So last year, if I compared to how the lab was, we had blocks everywhere, but that has allowed us to clear the backlog, but also maintains the good performance the lab is, which means when staff are coming in, they do feel that they're achieving something, they're clearing the work and able to not just go through the work, but we have also been able to support a lot more in terms of the training and education compared to last year. I think there's always a worry in terms of if automation comes in, is that going to take away my job? But actually it has allowed it to upskill a lot of our staff. It has allowed us to get more time to be able to support training and education, both on the technical side as well as formal education. Due to the backlog, we were receiving a lot of patient or service complaints due to histology delays. It's been months now since we've had any complaints that is due to histology delays, which again is time that the service is pending, which they could be doing on more throughput-related activities or service improvement. What's next for us? So part of our journey, again, our vision is looking at automation for areas where we are seeing bottlenecks. So it's not necessarily just looking at changing a part of the process, but also identifying any non-throughput related task. And for us, the other technologies that we're getting is your block slide archive retrieval, the moving of blocks from embedding to microtomy to storage. And the reason we're going through that, because we know based on our capacity map and process mapping, these are areas where you're spending a lot of time moving samples back, retrieving samples back, but they are also critical in terms of your other parts of the process. So we're at a stage where we are engaging with suppliers, and I think I would advise everybody to engage with suppliers to see how this technology could be helping you, and is this the right technology for you, because not everything will be the same for everyone. Some of the key notes, key points, is not something that your automation strategy, your performance improvement doesn't happen overnight. It's a long journey, it's an ongoing journey. You will still have to adapt and continue improving as your workload increases or changes, the type of work that you're receiving change. That then also means then if you're trying to implement an automation, you've got to be able to adapt to see what type of automation is good for you. As I said, one size does not fit all. So the AS410 is helpful for me as a lab, but there may be other technologies in terms of how you're implementing your on-demand printing. The type of automation for embedding that you choose may differ from side to side based on the type of workflow you've got. I would say based on that, I think have that as a clear vision to see what you would like to achieve. If you have a long-term strategy, it does help getting your trust to support that or any of your stakeholders to support that. One of the other key things, especially with automation, wherever the interface to your LIMS is required, this is really, really critical. So engaging your IT if you can as early as possible will be really beneficial. I appreciate, I think other trusts may be in a similar situation where your IT resource may be restricted, which means then in order for you to be able to see a full benefit of implementing automation doesn't happen overnight. For us with the AS410, whilst we did see a lot of the benefits, the fact that it wasn't interfaced until 6 months, 7 months later, we could not see the full benefit. We've got to review your workflow. We cannot try to fit an automation in terms of the workflow that is not perfect. So you've got to ensure that you're adapting your workflow to the equipment to make sure that you're getting the best out of it. So that's everything from me. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you to James, Zara, and Professor Hurst. I think what you've all highlighted is your own journeys that you've been on. There's there's similarities in each of those journeys. Coming back to a couple of points that you've raised, it is about understanding the why we are doing what we need to do, and what are those benefits going to be? What are those tangible outcomes going to be? And I think that's absolutely, I think that's a common theme across all three of those presentations is the understanding of what we need to do, going ahead and doing it, engaging, collaborating. Coming back to the point of staff engagement, what we as a organization do is we are getting more and more involved in staff engagement presentations where we come and we present the why around automation, what that does. And we do that with users. We did that over at Liverpool. We've done a few other sites where we will come in and we'll bring lunch, which is always a great game changer for the staff. Bring lunch over and we engage with the staff and we let them understand the why in collaboration with you. So it is really this partnership piece, because without that, none of this works, right? None of that engagement works. None of none of it works. And I just want to reiterate that we do that. I think we have got some other questions.
Yeah, let's get them through.
Wonderful. I can see that James is a little ahead of us.
Thank you, James.
James is already answering questions.
Because
yeah.
we have a question saying how many blocks an hour does it cut?
Yeah.
And is there much daily and weekly maintenance?
So what we are claiming with the AS is that it could run one block within 2 to 2.5 minutes, depending on different parameters and protocols. If you're conducting multiple sections like IHC projects, we can easily fit 100 slides within a little over an hour. In terms of, the additional question to that was? Maintenance. So taking the system into its complexity, I find it really easy to do maintenance, but it really is necessary in order to have fully operation. Usually it's like 15 to 20 minutes per day, depending, of course, if you have shifts, but roughly around 15 to 20 minutes.
And I think, we've been doing this a while, and there's always a question that says that I, as a person, can section that far quicker. And yes, there probably are people that can section a lot quicker than that, but they can't do it continuously, consistently, with the same accuracy, with the same quality, day, night, weekends. Depending on how often we turn the machine on, is how long that machine will work for. So I think that's one of the things I would like to reiterate on that. Any other questions that we've got there, please?
nursing staff training via Axlab? How much training support did they offer, and what was it like? And also, do Axlab provide support workflow mapping process optimization as part of implementation?
So we absolutely do workflow assessments. We can come in and be a part of that. We can be as part of this process as much as you want or as little as you want. I would recommend we are as much involved in it because we have got certain expertise that we can add to that. We've got people that have come from the lab that are working for us now as an organization that have been in histology. Amelia is one of them. Ainsley, Jacqueline in the UK team, Nick, we've got various people that have got this lab experience that can come in and really work with you to understand your workflow, understand how we can map that out. We can then, how we can implement, and then what sort of changes that might need to be made within the workflow to be able to assess with that.
Certainly.
Training, Amelia is the person that oversees the training throughout all of our direct markets. So
usually what we were doing is, let's say a unit like the AS, what you will find is we would do a 1-week application training. And the reason why we're doing so is because we want to pay attention that the end user is actually understanding the complexity of the system. And then we know when we are leaving that you have fully capable of operating the system. Now, that when that is being said, it's not like we are leaving you there. It's finished. We will have follow-up meetings every week. And the reason why we're doing so is because we know that changes are not easy always to make. So we want to be there as a helping aid to understand the unit and how you can utilize it and how you can optimize if you are already a lab who has been running with these systems for X amount of time.
And I would like to open that question up to Zara, James, Professor Hurst, who have all been a part of that. And please be as you all know me quite well. Well, not all of you. Zara, James, you certainly do. Be as honest as you want, right? As you need to be, because we're not going to hide behind anything. We're not an organization that does that. So please open it up to you guys.
Yeah.
I can give us, I mean, I was just saying in the chat as well, I think the training that we have received was excellent. So I know we started with like super user training, which was very detailed. I mean, even we recently had some training for the audio trimmer that we recently purchased. So, you know, I think that was really excellent detail, but it's not just that one-off training, it was also the ongoing training and support that we have received. I think your response time, I think that we received from Axlab, was, within hours. I mean, obviously, we've even got a WhatsApp group with the UK team here. So if we have any issues, something's filled, we can always contact them straight away. And I suppose even if you're not doing it officially, even sometimes when we've had weekend issues, the guys have, responded to us really, really quickly. And even I think when we've looked at, how you mentioned about kind of workflow improvement as well. I know we've been part of this journey with the Axlab team for any advice in terms of how we can streamline things as well. And then I think the other thing as well, when we wanted to change things, I think the team did come in order to support, like, changing parameters, changing protocol to be able to have more of an optimal or faster throughput. So yeah, my experience was very good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zara. James, if you want to elaborate on that, please feel free.
I'm not sure I've got anything further to elaborate. I think I just agree with everything.
Okay.
We've had multiple sessions before deployment with application specialists talking us through how the instruments would work and how we're going to approach training and what the limitations of the instruments are, and then actual hands-on training has been excellent as well. And then, as Zara said, the follow-up subsequent to that initial super user training's been excellent. Alex, from a maintenance perspective, and technical maintenance has been excellent as well, and worked really closely with the team to ensure that they've got the skills to be able to undertake the maintenance, the cleaning that will ensure that the instruments keep running optimally. So yeah, it's been excellent.
Thank you very much. I think
Professor Hammond-Herbst also has a saying in this.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Hurst, Professor Hurst, you're on mute at the moment. Just bear with us 1 second. Can you unmute?
Okay, I think maybe now. No?
No. Okay.
Please try again.
See if you can try and unmute again for us, please, Professor Hurst. No.
No.
Got some technical difficulties with Professor Hurst. Sorry about that.
Oh, maybe not. No.
What I can say is, as the business director for AxLab in the UK, our priority over the coming weeks and months isn't adding anyone else other than more application support, more service support. The elephant in the room is that there is potential for funding coming into the UK for more automation to be established and implemented. And it would be very naive of us if we weren't looking to try and bolster our already existing application support and service support. So we are cognizant of that, and we are in the process of doing that. We are also confident, and I'm saying this in a public forum with several people watching, that we will be able to deliver on all of that. We want to be a part of the solution, and the solution for the service in the UK is all of us collectively working together, and we want to be at the forefront of that, and we will be and are. So that's all I can add to that. I think we've got some other questions.
Yeah.
Do you have to pre-print slides with the histology case number before the process? Or does the AS410 print the slides as it cuts the block?
It prints the block, matching whatever you requested. We can have different print settings. It will also do a barcode, so it can correspond the block and the slide for variation.
So yes, so it will print the slides for you on the unit. So it will section it. It will then put it into a drying chamber, onto the slide, put it into a drying chamber, come back out on the other end, ready for you to go forward with your staining.
We have other implementations that you cannot easily translate Danish, Scandinavian, or European labs expertise and culture dynamics into NHS. UK implementation specialists are absolutely essentials for this to be successful.
Exactly.
Is there a UK-based implementation AxLab team?
There is, yes, absolutely. Fantastic question, and you're absolutely right. Every market has its own unique nuances, and yes, we have got a full team in the UK. I head that team up in the UK from a business perspective. We've got application support, service support, and we've got also access to the wider team under Amalia and the rest of her team, not just in Denmark, but also through Benelux and the rest of the Nordics, and also out in the US. So we have got the resource, and we have got this speciality locally, and we have got that available to us internationally too.
Sorry. Is the printable barcode 2D barcodes configurable to use on other equipments or digital software?
It can. We can also change the format of, so it could be either data matrix or it could be a QR, depending on what the facility is preferring.
Thank you. There was a follow-up comment to the original question around piecemeal implementation versus a full workflow implementation of automation. And I think the comment is, can you read that out for me, please, Mette?
Depends on whether
Yes.
or designing a new process path.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think we kind of try to touch on that in the answering of that question. It absolutely does depend on where you are in your journey. Are you changing a pathway, or are you trying to do something completely new from scratch? And I think if there's the ability to do it new from scratch, I would say absolutely go for it. I think we need exemplar sites. So I think we need, so if I look at Denmark, and I'm going to keep coming back to Denmark, not because we're a Danish company, but Denmark's got 15 years worth of automating the histology service. That's what they've done over the last 15 years. There's a site in Denmark that has got all levels of automation from different suppliers. And they're a site that puts their hands up and says, bring more. Bring the kit in, let us have a look at us, let us work with us, let us test it, let's prove the concept. Because They want to be a part, again, of the solution piece of driving transformational change within a service that traditionally for hundreds of years has been a manual-based service, right? And the one thing that we all share in common is we have, this is a very histology way of looking at it, but we've got a bit of tissue that comes in and we've got to get a diagnosis on the other end, right? And that's what we share in common.
Or maybe the fact that we see that we do need automation because, again, sample intake, skill set, that we are relying on it now. We want to have more on, and you know, Science in Denmark has just seen this these benefits in a bigger scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Mette?
With the current round of NHS funding, will AXA be able to offer quotes that offer value for money?
Absolutely, and we are currently doing so, and we will continue to do so. Reach out to us. If you don't have my contact details, it's on the website. Find me. I will put you in touch with a member of our team. If you want a workflow assessment analysis done, absolutely, I implore you, if you are looking to implement the solution, please lean on us, get us come in to have a look at this workflow with you. You know, I think it's a must, you know, in order to get it right, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
We have one question which we need to take.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a plan to have an auto embedder that can connect to the AS410 so that blocks moving from one unit to the next, and even ultimately also a auto processor?
It's a good plan. It's a good vision. I mean, we are looking into some type of automated embedder.
Yeah. So I think from the manufacturer DNS, Danny Ponsaiki, who manufacture the AT and the AS, you know, they have a roadmap on their current solutions on how they get those better. And if I look at the AS journey, over its lifespan currently to year to date, there's been 70 modifications to the hardware of the unit itself. So they're really trying to make sure that they have the best solution forward for what they specialize in. We are working with other suppliers, other manufacturers. Zara put up a beautiful slide of Imperco. Imperco have got a solution. Any of those that don't know who Imperco are, they are the organization that Blood Sciences track solution. That's what they do. They've done that for decades. They are looking at a solution where the embedding part is automated. The only manual part of that solution is orientation of the tissue. So the rest then is done as an automated process, but the orientation of the tissue and they as a manufacturer believe that that's the most important part of being involved in when it comes to the embedding process as a workflow. They've also got their solution is a whole end-to-end solution. It will trace the block, it will trace the journey, but I don't really want to go into that because it's now becoming sales and I don't want to be doing that. Coming back to the question, I think the holy grail is absolutely what you've alluded to, is finding a solution that succinct everything from start to finish. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think we've got some really good parts of the process. I think we've got a really good starting point to the process, and it's a journey. And I think manufacturers, suppliers, all of us are understanding that we need to work together, because I want to make a statement, and I don't see anything coming out from a manufacturer or a supplier that is an entire end-to-end solution for automation. So I do think it is going to be a journey. I don't know if James, Zara, Professor Hurst, if you can unmute yourself, maybe you would like to add into that. I know we've overrun, and
James is actually
James has left.
James is out.
Yeah.
Professor Hurst is holding up a.
He says, please
unmute the mic.
Able to unmute, so I do not know how to get
Okay. No,
Okay.
unfortunately, we've got some difficulties with you, Professor Hurst. If Zara and Professor Hurst, I know James is okay. If we can share your details with the audience along with the presentations, please
great.
get in touch with them so that they can answer any questions. I really want this to be about them telling you their story rather than it being perceived as an Axe Lab story, because it certainly isn't. It's a journey of automation within each of their histology services.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
We will share the recording. We will share the presentation.
There's going to be some documentation we can also send if you like that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the day.
See you in the future labs.
And a better weekend.
See
Bye-bye.
you on future labs.
Amazing. Thank you. I like amazing. Are we still?
Gosh.